Hey, I am Cody, and I am presenting on Adonis, who is the god of vegetation in Greek mythology. And just to give the story of Adonis, he was born in an incestuous birth by King Theus of Smyrna and his daughter Mira. And the way that went down was that Mira, for a while, had tried to have sex with her father, and to no avail, as the king sensibly declined this proposal. But one night, she was able to trick him into having sex with her, and on that night, they conceived Adonis. And when the king realized that it was his daughter who he had sex with, he was obviously pretty angry and ended up chasing his daughter into the forest, trying to kill her. And Aphrodite observed that this was going on and offered protection to the daughter by turning her into a tree. And so this was able to protect the daughter from the king, but then she had to spend the rest of her life as a tree. So I guess there are trade-offs. But so yeah, anyway, so since she was pregnant, when she'd been turned into a tree, 9 months later, Adonis was birthed out of the tree. But he had no parents at this point since his mom was a tree, and his father just considered him to be a bastard child. So there are a couple different versions of how the story went. One was that Aphrodite just found him in the forest again, since she knew that 9 months later that that tree would give birth, and that she kind of raised him as her own, and just fell in love with him that way. And another way that the story goes is that she saw him be birthed, and that as soon as she saw him, that Cupid struck her with an arrow, and she fell in love with him that way. Um, so yeah, another character that gets brought into this myth is Persephone, who is a goddess of Hades, and she also kind of took a mothership of Adonis, and it became like a shared mothership between Persephone and uh, Aphrodite, which is pretty progressive for mythological times. But yeah, so Persephone would take him for like they would kind of split their time between sharing Adonis. But things got a little tricky when both the mothers got pretty attached to him, and it would turn out that when Aphrodite went down to Hades to take Adonis back, that Persephone got too attached and wouldn't let her. So Zeus had to step in and set a rule that Persephone would get him for half the year, and Aphrodite would get him for the other half of the year. So kind of like a weird custody thing between parents in modern day. But yeah, so Persephone would get him for the winter months, like fall and winter, and Aphrodite would get him for the summer months, spring and summer. Um, so unfortunately, Adonis lived a pretty short life, and when he was spending time with Aphrodite, he was just hunting in the woods, and Aphrodite had always warned him to steer clear of the wild boars, but Adonis, being the rebellious prince bastard child that he was, went after the boar anyway, and the boar killed him. So that was unfortunate, and Aphrodite saw him laying dead and caught him in his last breaths, and sprinkled his wounds with nectar, and the nectar that sprinkled on Adonis's wound turned into the droplets of blood, and those turned into anemone flowers. I'm pretty bad at saying anemone, so excuse me. But yeah, there's kind of like these red flowers found in nature, and the rest of his blood became the Abraham River in coastal Lebanon. Um, so kind of just the how the how the myth continues after his death. His life continued to be celebrated at sorry, just one second. Um, Sorry, his life was celebrated during the annual festival of Adonia held at Byblos during the warmest period of the summer. And at that festival, women planted a lot of different vegetation on roofs, and the vegetation that they chose to plant was mostly fennel and lettuce. And those are both quick dying vegetables, and that's kind of symbolic of Adonis's premature death. And at this festival, they also used it to bring on rainfall for the growth of vegetation. So this all kind of plays into Adonis's role as the god of vegetation. And there are a couple different pieces, I think there's a bit of symbolism in this myth, as there are in many myths. And one is through the anemone flower that he becomes. And it's said that anemones are thought to bring luck and protect against evil. And they also represent anticipation. And in terms of the river that he becomes, myths are oftentimes used to explain like a practice, belief, or natural occurrence, or some kind of like this natural monument. And this is definitely an example of that. And although this isn't necessarily intrinsically related to nature, there are definitely some sexual symbols in there. And Adonis was born from a myrrh tree, which is what his mother was turned into, Aphrodite. And the spice of that kind of tree is used by the Greeks as an aphrodisiac. And another symbol of sexuality in the myth is that he died in a field of lettuce. And lettuce is often a symbol of impotence, which means unable to achieve a sexual erection, as I found out. So it's kind of a weird juxtaposition that he was born from an aphrodisiac and then died in a field of impotence. Yeah. And just in reading the different versions of the myth, I thought it was really interesting to see like the different variances there are from myth to myth. And the same basic story stayed the same, but there were some pretty significant variances, which I'm sure is true for any myths, which same thing with legends. They get passed down from generation to generation and culture to culture and just adapt on themselves. So one I brought up earlier was how Aphrodite fell in love with Adonis, and one was just kind of she naturally fell in love with him by caring for him, and another was that she was struck by Cupid's arrow and fell in love with him. And another was the help that Aphrodite provided to the daughter of the king. And in one story, it showed that the daughter begged for help from Aphrodite, and in another, Aphrodite just observed that she was being chased by the king and helped her on her own. And then also a bigger variance. I only saw one version like this, but it focused more on the story of the daughter and the parents of Adonis rather than Adonis's life itself. And in other works, Shakespeare also wrote a poem called Venus and Adonis, and it kind of tells a more poetic story of Adonis, and it just presents kind of contrasting ideas about love. And both characters speak in aphorisms, the two characters being Venus and Adonis. And aphorisms are just kind of like statements that are true in themselves, kind of like what's broken don't need to be fixed. So it's just kind of like a very blatant poem that presents contrasting ideas about love. And its overall, the myth's overall relation to nature is that Adonis's birth and resurrection kind of represent the vegetation cycle in nature. And he was born from a tree and raised in a forest, and he's now represented as a river after death. And he's also he's thought of as the god of vegetation and also worshipped as a corn god and the god of the grains. So yeah, I thought it was a very interesting myth that definitely ties into nature. There are a lot of others as I was researching that seemed to, or Greek myths that tied into nature as well. And I'm really excited to see what else you guys have presented on and learned more about myths and religious rites. So yeah, thanks for watching.